Hi, everyone. I'm the one product marketeer that got lost and that arrived here at the Sales Enablement Summit. So here today, I wanted to talk to you about how we at Showpad, so yes, it's definitely on the Showpad platform, but just wanted to give you some insights very practically about how we as a product marketing team, a content creating team, work together with our sales enablement team to really help our sellers across their entire journey. So a little bit about how we are set up. So actually, there are less product marketeers or fewer product marketeers than there are sales enablement practitioners at Showpad, as you would expect kind of from a sales enablement tool. So I was very lucky in the last 3 years that I've been at Showpad to work with a lot of great people in enablement, and they were instrumental to how we actually approach the use case that I want to bring to you today. Now, they played a little trick on me because they told me it was going to be a small workshop. Here we are, not a small workshop. So my opening question was, who attended Hendrik's presentation? Fantastic. So then you'll see some of the links that I'm going to try to make from where he kind of left us off with a lot of strategic data, information, and then how to bring it back to the actual day-to-day, what we're living. That was a quick hint. I browsed through that, but if nobody raised their hands, this was the title of the presentation in case somebody forgot. So takeaways from Hendrik's presentation. The way people buy is evolving. It's digital first. Our buyers do a lot of research. It's being done independent, and they don't really want to talk to somebody from sales until that moment that they've kind of already decided this or that vendor, that will be the one that I want to go with. On the other hand, the buying process becoming more complex. You saw the dream of the linear buying journey and then the reality of how it's very iterative. It's a non-linear path to purchase, but also more people being involved. And of course, for our sales teams, that brings a lot of challenges. Customer-facing teams. So for us, that also means not only sales, but customer success, but our BDRs across the entire touch point with our customers. They need support to excel in this new world, to really handle those challenges really well, and to also be able to really, Hendrik mentioned differentiating moves, like what are the differentiating moves that you can do during that entire buyer journey to really make an impact. They cannot do that on their own. As a content creator, as an enablement team, we have the tools, we have the insights often to see what has worked really well. There's just that little hiccup of how do we now translate all of that into actionable data for our teams to use. I want to bring in a little bit of research from Gartner first before I dive in, where they've said, okay, for organizations to be successful in the future of sales, which is now, they should focus on 3 things: automation, skills, and insights. Now, automation, first of all, not a complete, let's replace every human being, but more, let's look for ways where we can augment existing processes within marketing, within sales. Let's just make sure that we are not spending too much time on things that could be automated. Think very simply admin, like creating notes in your CRM. If we can just automate this, it frees up a lot of time. Nobody likes to put in those notes, and we've heard it before already. Sometimes the quality of those notes not that spectacular. Skills, very important. We've gone through it before, we've heard it before. Everything is changing. People or our sales teams, our customer-facing teams, they don't always have the knowledge or the skills to handle all of that change at once. Just think about the big switch to virtual selling, no longer being able to just go to a person, get that connection going, build that connection throughout the buyer journey. So how can we better support them by giving them the knowledge and the tools they need to really address these new challenges? And then the last one, the one I get most excited about, is insights. Of course, if you have access to data on what's working, what's not working, you can start transforming the way that you create your content, that you create your training in order to always help your teams to go one step further and really focus their attention on the buyer and your attention as well once you know what the buyer is truly interested in. So that's the one I want to zoom in on today. So insights to me, and of course here the product marketing background kind of shows, because we create a lot of content. We try to make sure that there is tailored content for that very first, this is what we do, this is why we are the best at what we do, but also along the journey here, you are a marketing persona, this is content created for you. You're a sales persona, this is what we have for you. So lots of content, but how do we know whether our teams are using it? Very important first step, because if they're not using it, they're not sending it. And if they're not sharing it with anybody, then we definitely never reach the person we built the content for. Because then the marketing persona that we spent much time researching never sees the perfectly tailored, personalized presentation or content that we created. Once we get there, so they're seeing it, they're using it, they're sharing it, what's actually resonating? What is that buyer looking at? What do we need to create more of? And be very honest with ourselves, create less of. It's not working. They're not looking at it. They're not interested. We tried, we failed. Let's iterate and move on. And that's, of course, the last piece. Once we know what really works, create more of it. Make it a scalable, repetitive process. Let's deep dive. So a real-life example from what we've done at Showpad. So we have the Showpad pitch deck. For context, it's unless you come in with a very specific question, of course. If you already done your research, a lot of people have, you kind of know what Showpad is, what they do, you don't need this deck, because you know who we are, you know how we stand in the market and everything. But for everybody else that needs that general introduction, this is your first go-to deck for our salespeople. You would expect high usage, because they kind of have to present it to everybody that comes in that doesn't have a very specific need. It's also why, caveat, it was an easy case study or an easy case to start with, because we know we expect high usage, because it's very first stage, very first contact, so we get a lot of data. And if you want to make good decisions, you do need sufficient data to make sure that you see what's actually working. Now, quick question to the group. I love the idea of the previous presenter. Do you feel confident that you can measure the impact of your content? Raise your hand if you feel very confident in doing that. Oh, it breaks my little product marketing heart. So, I mean, this is the problem that we face, right? We spend all our time researching, creating what we think, and based on research, is pretty good content. And then it goes into this black hole of, is anybody even using it? Is anybody even looking at it? And still we have to defend, well, we really need that agency to do more research into that industry because we really need more information. Yeah, but you can't really show us if anything you've done so far is having an impact on the bottom line. So, sad reality. What did we do? So these are the statistics from our pitch deck. Once it was live for 1 month, we went in to see what can be improved, what can we do better, and what should we definitely do less of. This is just a first high-level view of how many people were watching it in that first month. Obviously, you can see when it was launched, and we had a whole communication that went out. Everybody was directed to it. They had training paths to walk them through the talk track, to do a certification on you can no longer sell as long as you don't have a certification on this particular new pitch deck. Not true, but kind of that was the message. Afterwards, it drops down a little bit, but still consistent usage throughout the month. We also see who were the best users of the content, who interacts with it the most, uses it the most, shares it the most, and that will be interesting for what I'm about to show. What we then did, the entire deck, it was about 30 slides, something like that. And we mapped it out into a quadrant. So 2 big axes, what our internal teams use. Again, if they don't use it, if they don't view it, if they don't present it, it never reaches your buyer. So we really needed to make sure that our teams were using it. Then, once they use it, once they share it, what are the buyers engaging with? And we had 4 quadrants. Top right corner, sweet spot. Everybody wants to be there. That's what we keep on using because our teams see the value, they present it, they're able to present it really well, and our buyers, once they get the content, They're going back to it. They're deep diving in it. They're really interested in that particular piece. Bottom left, not the best. Teams are not seeing the value of it. They're like, okay, I'm just going to quickly skip through this slide because I don't really know what to say. Could be one thing. Or I know what to say, but it doesn't make sense. Don't know what coffee product marketing was drinking that day, but this is not the slide I'm going to be using. And buyers agree. They get the slide deck and they're like, well, that's not very relevant to me. So definitely iteration is key. Internal teams use it a lot, but buyers don't engage with it. So the internal teams see the value, but then once it gets sent to the buyer, they're like, okay, well, skip. Now, we do have, and you'll see the actual slides in a few moments, we did have a couple of these like big statement slides. So there's a lot of story to tell because it's like you want to draw in their attention, you want to create that moment of, oh, yes, this has changed. But once you get that slide deck sent to you, you're like, bought in. That big statement slide, you skip over it because it's just a sentence. So that could also be the case. But still, you want to be able to make sure that that's the truth. So ideally, you want to improve. Because our teams see the value, buyers don't yet. You want to make sure, okay, if we make little tweaks, if we add more information, better information, more relevant information, can we get that usage from the buyer side to the right hand? And then the last one, very interestingly, buyers heavily engage with it, but our teams skip over it. When they're presenting, they don't spend time. So why is that? It gives you a starting point. Because if buyers find it so interesting, why are we not explaining it more? Maybe they're finding it interesting because they went to the presentation, they listened, and they were like, well, slide 25. Need to have a moment to sit with that slide because the salesperson did not really explain it very well, so I'm trying to digest it on my own. So here you can see a little bit what that meant in terms of actual slides. So what people were spending a lot of time on, what the buyers were engaging with, it was mostly about that idea of sales enablement is not just for sales anymore. Ideally, if you want to have the full buyer journey supported, you need revenue enablement. It needs to be about marketing, customer success, and your sales team. Then a little bit about the platform, how it could help you with putting your buyer at the center of everything that you were doing, and then just a little bit about what we've been doing these past 10 years and how we've evolved as a company or as a platform. Nobody was really interested here. The big statement slide, so the kind of the opening slide of that entire pitch deck, that was the hook for the entire narrative. Worked as a hook for the narrative, we thought. Obviously, internal teams did not agree, and the buyer as well, it's just one sentence, so makes sense that they don't spend too much time. But then the other one, that was where we had like a little shocker, because I think we can all agree enablement in and of itself as an island won't work. It needs to be connected. And the first connection that we always think about and that we really tell our customers, like, please, please, please integrate your CRM. Integrate your CRM with your enablement platform, because if you're doing training, but you're not linking it to the actual performance, how do you know if your training is working? If you are creating a lot of content and you want to know if your content is impacting your revenue, if you're not having a view on which content is closing deals, that sits in your CRM. Then how will you prove that you're making the right choices in terms of content strategy? This slide created the connection between training, knowledge, skill development, performance. And we were like, fantastic slide, best slide ever. And apparently not. There was a problem. Like, our internal teams weren't using it, buyers were not engaging with it, whereas we thought, okay, but it's so important, because if you're not having that connection, how are you measuring your success? Top left, internal teams, yeah, fantastic. Buyers, not so much. A lot of data slides. So we really wanted to anchor our story on, this is not just us waking up in the morning and saying, I have a fantastic idea. It's all going to be about modern selling, and I'm just going to invent something new. No, we had a lot of proof points from the market, how it was changing, what was needed. We maybe overloaded the slides with too much data. People were like, okay, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Skipping through it again. But then another data point slide was super relevant suddenly. So there's that, okay, what can we learn from this? Maybe cut it down. We had 4 slides with data, might have been data overload at some point. And then the other one, so that was very heavily viewed by buyers, where sellers meet their buyers. What can you do to make sure, again, that your seller is ready to make those differentiating moves? And obviously for the buyer, very interesting, but our teams glanced over it. So what does that now mean? What did we do as an enablement and product marketing team? For enablement, it gave them a starting point, because I've spoken to a couple of people here, and I think if there's one thing product marketing or content creators and enablement has in common, so many one-off requests, so much to do in a day, and not enough hours to do it. So how do you guide your efforts? How do you know where to start? What will make an impact? And of course, we knew this is the first pitch deck. Like, everybody needs to do it. If that one sucks, then we have a problem. So for enablement, it was like, okay, very targeted. We're going to start with better enablement on this pitch deck. So targeting the training to the underused. So underused from an internal point of view. Our teams were not talking through it, but buyers were engaging heavily. What's the problem? And that's where those top users come in mind. They're very familiar with the deck. They feel comfortable presenting the deck. Yet once they get to that slide, so where sellers meet buyers, they still glance over it. So you have people to go to, like, look, you obviously know this talk track. What's wrong? Is it that this part is not clear? Is it that you find the slide ugly? Like, not everybody loves pink. It's fine. But you have a starting point. Again, you know somebody who you can go to. And then for us, like, next level in everything that we try to do is slide decks are the starting point, because we have to train them on the narrative. And especially for newer sellers, you can't expect them to go, oh, I'll take a little bit of that slide deck, a little bit of that, a little bit of the product, and I'll make the most fantastic story ever. No, we train them on a very singular, fixed talk track. But the idea is that from there, they learn, and then they can start building more of those personalized conversations. And for us, a key belief there, and that's where the enablement team supports us really well, is that slide decks can only take you that far. They're always going to be linear. If you ask me a question, and I know, well, I'm going to get to that, but it's only on slide 45, I need to keep you engaged until I get to slide 45, or I'm frantically clicking my button, like, oh, close your eyes for a second until we get to 45, so you don't ruin, like, the nice GIFs that I put in my slide deck. But if it's interactive and people ask a question, it's more of a guided selling, guided buying experience. You can be like, sure, we can handle your question now. We just click here, the right piece opens up, and we can have that conversation. So for them, the most impactful slides, they started using those to put into one of those interactive experiences. Because again, you got to start somewhere. You can't put everything into an experience, but put what works, put what has the most impact there, and it's a great starting point. For us, kill your darlings, remove the underperforming slides, or try to adjust them. For instance, the one where we had, like, where performance meets skills, that for us was such an important message. We were like, okay, we're not going to kill it, but we are going to do our very best to make it clearer, to get people trained on the talk track, and see how it evolves, because it's so important to, like, the key value of our platform. We're not just going to remove it. B2B sales is broken. Yeah, well, we can live with that being removed. Let's put it that way. Then the high-performing ones, okay, now we know what's working. Let's make more of that. Fantastic. And then identifying opportunities for personalization goes a little bit hand in hand with what I had underneath enablement, but also from a marketing point of view, when we first launched it, it was a PDF. Why? Very static, you need to, just for a moment, learn this by heart. And then the next one was, okay, now you've all learned it, you've got it, We've trained you on it. Now you can get the fully personalizable G slide. So when you're going into a conversation with a buyer, you already know a little bit about them, so not the ideal situation, but if you know a little bit about them, take slides out, remove them, adjust the titles, add in you're a Salesforce customer or you're an MS Dynamics user. Use that information to start creating a more personalized version of that standardized pitch deck. So just where we could, we wanted to highlight those opportunities. And then for our teams, they finally got to see on a bigger scale, what do buyers like? What do they engage with? Because they already know that on an individual level. So when they send their slide deck out, they can see, oh, they were reacting to it, they weren't reacting to it. But they don't have that high-level, eagle-eyed view of what's happening across the business. What's, for instance, very interesting to other enterprise customers, because I'm a seller in enterprise, or what doesn't work in growth, or what doesn't work in mid-market. They don't have that. They just have it on their own customer side. So we gave them that insight into the full picture. Their conversations got more effective. They were trained on the talk tracks that they weren't comfortable with, and they got better content out of it. And they were able to better differentiate, because now they can bring that story more confidently, differentiating from the competition. This is, of course, an ideal state, but it doesn't just, you don't start there. It starts with something as simple as just centralizing. Because if you don't have everything in one place, and with everything I do mean not only your content, but also your training content. You need to be able to see and make those connections between, is it my content that's not so great, or is it my training that's not so great? And is it actually, when I improve one or two, does it make a difference on my bottom line? Because then you can start filtering out noise from your teams usually of, yeah, I couldn't find it, so I'm just gonna create something myself. And then you're like, okay, well, fantastic, only spend 5 hours on this, but sure. And then it winds up in this OneDrive, or it winds up on their desktop and never to be seen again, except when branding changes, and then you're like, ha, I remember that logo from 5 years ago. Streamline communication, real story. Not at Showpad. What campaigns are we currently running? Because streamlining communication, again, we've heard it before. I think it was Laura that mentioned it. If you just plot out everything that sales gets in terms of information from different teams, not only in terms of training, but just in general company information, they're so overwhelmed. Whereas for us, our enablement team is our air traffic control. We don't communicate directly to our sales teams. We go to enablement and we say, look, we're preparing XYZ, for instance, recently an industry campaign. We're preparing that. We're looking to launch then. We're gonna do this, that, and that. What do you see as potential blockers? Oh, they have a training, a sales methodology training that afternoon or that week. That already keeps them busy 2 hours in that week. I wouldn't do a training that week because they're gonna complain, they're not gonna be engaged, they're gonna just be like, fine, whenever I get a client that is in that industry, I'll have a look. They have a better view on that than us. Like even sometimes simple things, you're so in your world of, okay, we needed to get this done. And then you're like, yeah, it's done. It's end of quarter. No, never mind. We'll get back to it in 2.5 weeks. And then provide that guidance, because it stresses enough. If people cannot find it, if they don't use it, they don't present it, they don't share it. So what we really rely heavily on is also playbooks, just making sure that we bundle all the relevant information according to an industry, a persona, a product, a solution set. We bundle it all in one place, and then they know, okay, if I'm presenting to somebody in a certain industry, I only have one stop shop for that persona, that industry. They find everything. And then give them some recommended next steps, because nobody can know everything, and we have that eagle-eyed view, again, on across the business what has worked. So if they want to do, or if they're going to do a presentation in an industry to a certain person, we can tell them, look, this has worked really well for your peers. Because at the end of the day, that's still what works best. Not product marketing that says, really good slide deck. No. You know, that top seller that's also an enterprise, she used that deck. And she was very successful and she closed that deal. Or she used these pieces of content along the buying journey to always move the dial a little bit. This is a best practice for you. They're gonna love that. They're not gonna love me saying, hey, best deck ever. But another key takeaway, we've heard it before, it's just technology. At the end of the day, it's just, we use Showpad and it's just technology. If I didn't have my enablement team, if I didn't have the other people in product marketing, if we didn't have the right processes in place to make sure that this was successful, that we can do things like this, we can have Showpad today, another vendor tomorrow, we would still have the same problems. Because if you can't really get your entire organization behind what's needed for a tool to work, then you just have another black hole to dump your content in. And it can be a beautiful black hole, but it still won't get you the insights or the next steps or the impact that you're looking for, because at the end of the day, you're getting your company to sign off on a new tool that's not always super cheap. If after 2 to 3 years you cannot not prove what that tool has done for your company, then they're looking at you like, well, you were knocking on my door every day telling me I need this now, and then 3 years later you can't even show me what you've achieved. Well, very sorry, but we're not going to give you budget anymore, or worst case. So there was a theme to my title. That's my last slide. It wasn't just because I thought lean, mean, modern selling machines sounded really cool, but there is that view that we have on, look, so much has changed and the way we used to sell doesn't work because the way people used to buy is so different. So a modern buyer needs a modern seller, and a modern seller needs insights. They need to be able to collaborate internally, but also externally. They need to create that value, add value at every step, and ideally set up to be digital first. Yes, human, in person. I mean, this is fantastic. First time in 2.5 years to actually do this live and that people get to see that I have legs and I'm not just a little box on Zoom. But a lot of our conversations will still happen in a digital first setting. So setting them up to succeed then will only make their jobs easier once they do get that in-person moment. Ta-da! Thank you.
Questions? Ooh, here we go.
Go ahead, fight for it. No.
I really like the framework around like enablement, content creator, and setting teams. But do you have any advice when implementing this with like when you have like high retention? So like you're trying to move your sales teams from like basic to like more advanced, etc. But when everyone is not at the same level, how can you achieve this?
Yeah, I think the example that Hendrik showed this morning really helps. Because if you have those more advanced sellers in your team, you can get your insights from what they're doing. Advanced, but doesn't always mean most successful. I think still, again, you need to couple the two. Because you often have those, I always reach my quota. Why would I do a training? I've reached it every month, so I don't need sales enablement. So if you can pair those two, like who are your top performers, learn from them, and then even the least tenured person will immediately see the value. They're like, okay, I've only been here a month. Like everything you can give me on what other people are doing who've been here longer, fantastic. But even the longest tenured rep wants to reach their quota. And if you can show them this is what the top performer, and the top performer might have only been there for 5 months, but if they're doing the training, if they're getting the certifications, if they're using the content that's being recommended to them, and as a result, they're reaching their quota consistently, nobody will say no to that. No seller will go, well, I don't need commission, it's fine. So that would be my advice. Like find those top performers and use them. And not focus on tenure. Everybody will want to learn from somebody who's been doing a consistently good job and learning how they do it, what they're using, and what makes them so good. Because everybody wants that first spot. They want to dive in there.
One more.
Okay.
Oh. I have a microphone now. I really liked the matrix you showed, and I thought it was really helpful to see kind of the rep engagement, the customer engagement. But I guess, how do you validate that customer time on slide equates to effectiveness? Because I guess like the classic or canonical example would be a pricing slide will always have the most time engagement, but it's not necessarily an effective slide to sell your product. So to what extent are you, as product marketing or as enablement, actually engaging with customers to understand how, like, their experience of the content?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there again, it all starts with needle in a haystack. Where do we start? So if you see those outliers of super high engagement, why is it? Then you can start diving into it. You can understand, okay, we see so many buyers looking or engaging, viewing that slide for a very long time. Just ask a couple of your friendlies. I think it's very important to have good relationships with at least a couple of sales reps. I know, so hard. But at least a couple of people that you know, they're willing to help me get into contact with somebody they've spoken to, or on the customer success side with an actual customer, and getting them into those conversations. I think that's still the one thing that for us is also a struggle, is that often our enablement team, they get invited to prospect and buyer calls or to sit in on or talk to them. We barely get, because we're marketing, and it's like, no, we're not going to invite marketing. So luckily, again, we have our enablement team that does have that good connection, or a better connection, let's put it that way. And then we kind of feed them the questions like, look, this slide you need to kind of ask, because we don't know. We don't know what's going on. We can't understand why it's suddenly getting so much engagement. But you can only learn so much from data. But like I said, it gives you a starting point. Yeah, or I can. Last one?
Last one.
Yeah, question. So this is from a content perspective, and you mentioned some content really resonates and some.
Is that me? Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Let's say you have 10 pieces of content or 100, right? If they're all mediocre, it doesn't really matter which one is better than the other. They're all mediocre, right?
Yeah.
So looking at it, you want to have it first time right. You want to make sure that your content creators have the exact same view, know how the content will be used, and have the same sales methodology ingrained into their ways of creating content. How do you look at that from a product management?
Well, afraid to set off the weird sound again. Okay, so first section of your question, if you have a lot of mediocre content, doesn't really matter, or you can't really draw a lot of conclusions. I still think it's not you won't find a silver bullet from the first piece of content that you create. And obviously, what we've also done is we've spent a lot of time with our sales team understanding the way they sell. So I think before there was a very big discrepancy between, we did industry content and we just created one pager, slide deck, logo, case study. There you go, bam, you have it. And it just didn't work. It got lost and we don't know when to use it, we don't know how to use it. So then once we, like 2.5 years ago, we really sat together with our sales teams, with the enablement team, like, what is the journey that you go through? What's the methodology that you're using? What are all the checks that you need to do in order to move to the next stage? And are we actually creating content that either helps you do that step better, or if it's not really up to you entirely, like you can ask who is the economic buyer, you can ask who else is on the buying team, but then once those people come in, do you have the content to support that conversation? So that was really a big shift, and just next step, not content dumping on sales, was let's remove some of the content and let's make sure that we have something for the specific turning points in the buyer journey, and then start from there. And it still wasn't, not everything was great. I mean, there were some lower quality content pieces in there, but you live and you learn. And again, if they're using it, they're very vocal, you also have to filter out that noise, but you have the data to show, well, they're being vocal about it's not working, but it's really not working from the data. And then you go into those conversations with your tenured reps, with your top performers, with some of their buyers, like, look, we're just trying to improve, we want to know, and you start from there. Okay, so if anybody has more questions, we're over there, so feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you.